A very good evening, everyone, to all our distinguished guests and speaker panelists and attendees for the day. It gives me immense pleasure to welcome you all to the special virtual knowledge sharing session on circularity beyond recycling, prioritizing, reduce, and reuse, organized by United Nations Global Compact Network India in association with CGI, SAHAS, and VNV Advisory Services. GCNI is the Indian local network of United Nations Global Compact, provides a robust platform for the Indian businesses and the academic institution and civil society organization to join hands for strengthening responsible business practices in India. Everyone over here will certainly agree that the radical transformation is the way for the world to use its resources and to meet the needs of the future generation. It is critical, therefore, to have a new model approach of circular economy for the resilient growth of the world economies and have a sustainable future for all. Keeping this imperative in mind, the theme adopted for the discussion is indeed a crucial one that calls for everyone's attention and action, which is the pathway to economic-wide transition towards SDG 12, which is essentially emphasizing on responsible consumption and production. It is with deep regard and respect that I now welcome all our dignitaries and a galaxy of intellectuals who have done extensive work in their respective fields and thereby contributing in the sustainable future. I would now request to welcome Ms. Shabnam Siddiqui, the Executive Director of UNGCNI, to deliver her address for the session. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you so much, Panchali. I think almost all of the welcome, the warm welcome you have done already, which is extremely nice. Just to add to what Panchali has said, distinguished moderators and panelists, participants, colleagues, partners, I take this opportunity to formally welcome you to this webinar, Pathway to the Circular Economy, with the theme Pathway to an Economy-Wide Transition towards SDG 12. Now, this topic has been important for us, like Sandeep and myself has been talking about it for the last 2 years, because recycling, as we see it, the circularity aspect for the last couple of years has been actively being promoted on the ground level, and we have good case studies on the ground, which have done, which have showcased accomplishments both of stalwart NGOs like SAHAS, as well as corporates doing great work. But recently, when we ourselves as Global Compact got involved into the ending plastic waste kind of a domain, what we realized is that what we are trying to do is only reduce and beyond recycling, what can we do? So how do we both reduce, reuse, and from our angle also that corporates declare their footprints in these domains. So whether it is plastic, whether it is solid waste, whether it is e-waste, if they can declare their footprints, then it's easier to monitor, easier to report, and easier to convert that case study into something that can be emulated by multiple organizations. I'm glad that we have speakers today in the forum, although we were saying that a lot of the speakers are the ones that speak on forums all the time to each other. But beyond that, I don't think we talk about the same things, because the way we see natural calamities happening, every time a webinar or a knowledge sharing session happens, another big calamity has happened somewhere else. So climate and waste are not keeping pace with the kind of work that we are doing. And we really need to move beyond recycling in a big way and look at reuse and declaring of footprints. So with that, I think I will not take a lot of time, because there are quite a few exceptional speakers with having done work on the ground. And I would like to give the floor to them. Thank you so much. Have a great deliberation. and lovely evening. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for those kind words. I'm certain that this session will be fruitful and it will have further encouraged discourse on this topic. Moving forward, I would now like to welcome Mr. Navdeep Singh Mehram, the head of CSR and Sustainability DIGO India, for the theme address. Mr. Mehram is a seasoned and allied professional with over 20 years of multi-sectoral and multi-dimensional experience in managing corporate social responsibility, sustainability profile in corporate sectors, multilateral agency, and community-based organization. I would now request Mr. Mehram to take over and deliver the theme address for the day, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, Shabnamji, and thank you, Panchali. I think you both have really hit the road by setting the contest. I have about 7 to 8 minutes with me. And when I looked at the theme, which is pathways for economy-wide transition to achieve the SDG 12, which is sustainable consumption and production, I was just wondering that whether I should bring examples on the table or I should look at the macro pathways which can actually lead to the economy-wide transition. So while I was kind of trying to understand the pathways, and we have galaxy of speakers and experts in this panel. So I just wanted to take out kind of a step back and say that what could be those, top 3 pathways which can really make an impact. So many companies have done a lot of work, many NGOs have done a lot of work, even government has done a lot of work. But if there is something which we can kind of step back and say, okay, what are the 3 big things which are the pathways that can actually trigger this transition? So the first one, which is very, very critical, not only for India but even the global context, is the policy reforms. So one big pathway for this transition to happen will be through policy reform. And honestly speaking, I am very happy to say that, and like Shabnamji was saying, that there has been a kind of a new energy towards plastic waste management ever since PWM 2016 came up. So they were revised in 2018. They were again updated in 2021. So that is what we see as policy level work at the first level, which can actually trigger many things. And like we were hearing Shabnamji that people should declare their plastic footprint. All of that could happen because now we have a very tighter regime under plastic waste management, and it took almost 5 years to evolve, and it will keep evolving. So that is on the policy level. And under that itself, the second policy reform which is happening is the extended producer responsibility. A national framework is already out. People have given their comments on that. That is the second policy level reform which is happening in our country. The producers and the brand owners and the manufacturers, there is a responsibility and accountability which is being fixed. The tracking and tracing of the plastic waste management, post-consumption plastic waste, even the industrial waste, plastic waste, recycling. Sahas is there as a very expert NGO working on that. So EPR is the second policy reform, which I can see, which is going to trigger an economy-wide kind of a transition in achieving responsible consumption and production. The third thing which I want to mention on the policy front is Government of India under Ministry of Environment has also launched National Resource Efficiency Policy. So NREP is there, which actually talks about how can we optimize or how can we be very productive in using the resources. And that NREP talks about looking at the sector-wide approach. So I think the first state which has started adopting the NREP is the Goa, and they are trying to look at tourism sector to implement the guidelines of National Resource Efficiency Policy. So there are many policies which we can keep talking, but I just wanted to bring one pathway, which is the policy reforms. The moment policy reforms kicks in, I think the rest of the things will start kind of taking a shape, and there are expected economy-wide impact or transition on SDG, on achieving various SDG, including SDG 12. The second pathway, which I believe is very, very important and critical, is that since we are dealing with huge problems, let's say even if it is plastic waste management or climate change or carbon or greenhouse gases, these are massive problems to solve, and the pathway to solve that is a collaborative manner. Partnerships, greater stakeholder inclusion and accountability is required. So that is the second pathway. So if we have the right policy reform and supporting policy framework, then we need more resources, more hands to come together and solve this problem. I think we've seen at industry association level, many such initiatives are undertaken. But I think it has to go beyond only industry. It has to be even public sector has to play their role. NGOs have to play their role, which they are playing. Also, citizens have to play their role, which I think which is a very, very critical component missing in many conversations. And also there are problems which are very, very hyper local. So it has to be thought through the entire pipeline, that where the problem is. And since we are talking about recycling and we are heavily focusing our conversation on that, I think the whole problem also lies in our kitchen dustbin. We do not segregate at that level, and I think that is the smallest initiative which can actually solve a big problem. So more partnership, more stakeholder accountability is definitely the second pathway which I will recommend that should be taken. Just for an example to share, Diageo is working with Ashok Leyland at Alwar, come together and actually do the water replenishment project in that catchment where all of us are having our factories. So there are ways and means where we can collaborate and solve the same problem or solve the problem together. So that is the second pathway I kind of recommend. And the third one, which is actually which will be the game changer ultimately, is the disruptive technology. I think we need to bring in disruptive technologies to solve these problems, and we need to focus on are we sustainable by design. So Diageo has a global strategy 2030, where we have a mandate, a pillar to work on that. We will be sustainable by design. So while achieving that particular strategic pillar, a lot of work has kicked off at the R&D level. How can we reduce GHG? How can we reduce material? How can we eliminate few things? What are the resources required? How much timeline is required? All of that is happening, and I think the technology is going to play a huge role over there. Just one example on technology I can share what Diageo has achieved in the last 10 years is, 10 years ago, Diageo actually took a mission that we will go fossil free, fuel free. And for that, I think the major bottleneck was our boilers, where we used to feed coal. I'm happy to announce 2021, we are zero coal. All our factories run on biofuel. We have reduced our carbon emission from 128,000 metric ton. From that, we have come down to 5,000 because we have eliminated entire coal. And that 5,000 is also mostly the DG set, because the DG generators are actually designed like that. So we are working on can we eliminate that also. So technology, changing the technology of our boilers and then eliminating a huge coal made this thing happen. So many companies are doing, many big multinationals are already putting their capex on technology, switch from the older technology to new technology. So I think the technology will be the third pathway, and there are many, and I don't want to continue as an opening speaker. I would love to have any question, basically any question which people want to ask me, I'll be happy to answer. Otherwise, I think I will stop here because I thought I'll just set the context and then we will hear it from the experts that what are the pathways which can be used to reach the milestone of achieving SDG 12 and other SDGs also simultaneously, where UNGC is making a huge effort. So thank you very much. Look forward for this wonderful session. Thank you.
Thank you so much for capturing and setting the context for the discussion. It was indeed very thought-provoking. Moving forward, I would now like to invite the keynote speaker of the day, Mr. George Mattickle. Mr. Mattickle is the president of CGI Asia Pacific Global Delivery Center of Excellence, where he oversees the global delivery capabilities across Asia Pacific. He has worked with leading communication companies across the globe and delivered ERP services for large retail and consumer services, manufacturing and logistic companies. Over to you, sir, for the keynote address.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Panchali. It's a real privilege for me to represent CGI and give the keynote address at this very, very important forum. You know, today most experts consider climate change as the defining global issue of our time. And the urgency of the crisis has really taken hold, and led by the UN Global Compact, many corporations within industry, including my own, have committed to ambitious targets to achieve net zero carbon emissions. And CGI is a company based in Canada, a leading global provider of end-to-end IT services with 78,000 employees worldwide and more than 15,000 in India. And our strategic priorities commit us to contributing to the global effort to combat the impact of climate change. In fact, CGI is the only IT company that is represented on the COP26 President's Business Leaders Group in the UK. As part of this group, we are working with other members to raise ambition for climate action by businesses, and also to encourage businesses to give their governments confidence to set ambitious nationally defined contributions. As part of our continuing efforts to bring various sections of society together to discuss, to share knowledge, and to tackle this defining issue of our time, we are really privileged to sponsor this event. Our own goal at CGI is to achieve net zero carbon emissions by 2030. And we are also signatories to the UN Global Compact. And we demonstrate our commitment to an environmentally sustainable world through projects delivered in collaboration with our clients, and through radically changing our operating practices, our supply chains, and also through community service activities. However, currently, a lot of the decarbonization efforts are centered around transitioning towards better energy efficiency and using renewable energy. While these efforts are certainly commendable and contribute to the cause, they are really not sufficient. A report from the Ellen MacArthur Foundation estimates that these measures can only address 55% of emissions. The remaining 45% are harder to reduce emissions that arise from the management of land and the production of buildings, vehicles, electronics, clothes, food, packaging, many other goods that we use every day. Overall, resource extraction and processing are responsible for more than 90% of land and water-related environmental impacts, with agriculture being the main driver. Now, in order to broaden the impact of our efforts, we all have to migrate towards a circular economy, which will complete the picture of what is required to tackle the climate crisis. And this offers an approach that is not only powered by renewable energy, but also transforms the way products are designed and used. Take, for example, the matter of e-waste or electronic waste. The world is generating more than 50 million tons of e-waste annually. According to Computer World, the material value of this e-waste is at least 50 billion pounds sterling. E-waste has now become the single biggest source of various precious and rare earth minerals. 50 to 60% of the world's tungsten is found in our devices. 26% of the world's tin is found in our laptops, and 9% of the world's gold presently is in electronic waste. However, the recycling and recovery rates for e-waste remains poor. Just about 20% of e-waste is recycled using methods where metals are extracted and efficiently and safely. The biggest challenge in recovering and reusing these resources lies in how these goods are designed and produced. Most products are being designed as single owner items where any repair or refurbishment is not even possible, and even recycling is expensive and hazardous. So what can companies, IT companies such as ourselves, that are the largest producers and even consumers of these products do? While the hardware industry will have to play its part by designing products based on the principles of circularity, the software industry will have to implement procurement and disposal norms to develop the market size of circular products and businesses. We also need innovation around resource extraction and recovery. In this respect, work that is happening in the area of bio-leaching looks very promising. Further, migrating towards a shared economy or a rental economy are revolutionary concepts to de-link economic growth from resource consumption. New business models have emerged with the support of IT that are able to support demand and supply matching, which is the backbone of a shared economy. This shows the important role that the IT industry is playing and can play in the future, as well for the widespread adoption of a circular economy. The circular economy has the potential to increase the planet's resilience to the physical effects of climate change. Businesses will be able to reduce their economic reliance on certain materials that could otherwise be vulnerable to extinction if they are put back into the ecosystem through a cyclical model. However, this change has to be tectonic and not just at the surface. Surface level interventions are not helping sufficiently. As per a report from the Pew Trust, plastic waste, for example, is entering the ocean at a rate of about 11 million metric tons a year. And in spite of the huge momentum building for this cause, the current commitments by governments and industry will reduce the annual volume of plastic flowing into the ocean by only about 7% by 2040. The reason big commitments are not translating into big impact is because the effort is centered around recycling instead of designing to reduce and reuse plastic packaging. Now, there is no denying that revolutionary work is happening in certain pockets and industries. However, it is not enough if a few companies change their practices. Every organization, big and small, needs to embrace this new way of doing business centered around circularity in the way we design products and services and how we consume and dispose them. I really look forward to the rest of this program, which will delve deeper into this matter, this topic, and shed more light, especially the upcoming panel discussion. So in closing, I just want to urge organizations aiming for carbon neutrality to evaluate circular economy-based interventions that can have a far-reaching and more sustained effect on climate change. Such an approach will go a long way in helping us collectively deal with the defining global issue of our time and have a positive impact on our future life and well-being. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir, for capturing the theme of the discussion so well. Moving forward, we will move towards the panel discussion for the evening. I would now like to welcome the panelists for the session. Our first panelist is Mr. Sudhir Subbaraman. He is the Senior Vice President and Business Unit Leader at CGI India, overseeing the communication and media vertical. He has more than 25 years of holistic and global experience across the globe and the corporate sector. Our second panelist for the day is Mr. Prabjot Sodhi. He is the Senior Program Director at CEE, Center for Environment Education. Mr. Sodhi has a diverse experience in leading and implementing projects in plastic waste management, climate change, and natural resources for the last 38 years. Our third panelist for the day is Ms. Sunidha Rajkumar. She is the Chairperson, Climate Governance Malaysia, which is the country chapter of the World Economic Forum's Climate Governance Initiative. She is also a member of advisory panel of UN Global Compact Malaysia Sustainability Center for Excellence and Workstream Lead for Governance Policy at the CEO Action Network. Our fourth panelist for the day is Mr. Vaibhav Rathi. He is a technical advisor at ZIZ. He has an expertise in circular economy with over 10 years of experience and works on development of an innovative low carbon cement technology, which is now piloted in multiple countries across the globe. Our fifth speaker of the day is Ms. Vilma Rodriguez. She is the founder and CEO of Sahas Waste Management Private Limited, a social and environmental impact enterprise, and she has 2 decades of experience in the Indian waste sector and is widely considered as one of the pioneers of centralizing waste management in the country. Allow me to introduce Mr. Sandeep Roy Chaudhary, who will be leading the discussion as the moderator for the webinar today. Mr. Chaudhary is the co-founder and director of VNV Advisory Services with over 15 years of experience. He has been at the forefront for working for the climate change and livelihood. Once again, a hearty welcome to all our panelists today. Now I may request Mr. Chaudhary to take the floor and begin the much awaited discussion for the day. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Panchali. And a big welcome to everyone. I would request all our panel members to switch on their cameras if they can. It'll be nice to start this conversation. As Panchali mentioned, we're supposed to be a galaxy of intellectuals, so let's try and do justice to that. So yeah, it's quite a diverse panel, so I'm really looking forward to the discussion. This is a subject that's very close to our hearts. Like Shabnam mentioned right at the top, this has been something that we've been discussing for a while in terms of how design thinking needs to change, how we need to move beyond just the whole concept of recycling being the be-all and end-all of circular economy. As much as it's important, I think we all acknowledge that it's really important. But I think this session is more to set context or to have learnings of how we can move just beyond that into a domain of upstream design changes, as well as consumer behavior awareness, policy level changes, the whole work. So if you look at the panel, we have people from business, we have people from business collectives, we have people from policy, we have people from the bilaterals, and we have actual implementers. So looking forward to it. And as a start, maybe if I could, we're going to follow quite a fluid conversational session here and not make it about speeches after speeches. So I think which will be more about exchanging ideas and coming up with some takeaways. We are really, really keen on having some takeaways from this event. So yeah, let me just quickly start with Vaibhav, if I don't see you, but.
Hi, Sandeep.
Excellent, thank you. So I could start with you, Vaibhav. Look, this is a problem that we've been dealing with for a while now, and being in this sector, and I know that you've been working on this for a decade now. This whole concept that how do we move beyond recycling? Like, we all acknowledge the fact that recycling is really, really important, but that's not enough to actually get circularity. That's not exact circularity in its true sense of the word, right? I mean, so what do you think the gaps are, and whether it's just a knowledge gap, is it an implementing gap, is it a finance gap, right? So the whole thing. So if you could just shed some light on that to start off with, so that we can set some context, and I'll move on to the other speakers on that.
So Sandeep, I'll start with one of the challenges, which is a mindset. All this, the lead has to be taken to start with in this whole discussion about reduction and reuse. The first person or the first entity to take a lead is the higher management of all the plastic manufacturing companies, or maybe people who are packaging their FMCG products into plastics. One is the mindset, and that includes government as well as the private sector. But the first step, and I'll kind of try to qualify my point with what is happening around the world, where industry has taken so many steps, right from startups to big businesses conglomerates, in kind of moving towards reduction and elimination of single-use plastics, and also going towards reuse by kind of innovative ideas in packaging. So one is the mindset, and then after that there are 3 things that I see as challenges. One is the knowledge gap is there for sure. If you consider ketchup pouches, chip pouches, the gutka pouches, the dairy milk products, we still don't know how to repackage them without plastic. We still don't know how to repackage them without plastic on a mass scale, right? So that is a knowledge gap. Maybe, we need more research there. Maybe we need more innovation there. Another is a knowledge sharing gap. There is plethora of work happening across the world Portugal, Canada, USA, UK. There are many startups and companies which are going towards innovative solutions on reduction in packaging, elimination in packaging, moving towards alternative production. I'll just give you an example. Locaine is a global brand for consumer products. They have removed clear plastics which are used to package their own personal care products, and they are expected to launch this whole product line across the globe by 2022. And there is an estimation that to start off with, just in the 6 months, they can reduce 8 tons per annum of clear plastic from their 2 or 3 product lines. If you look at Soname is a Portugal-based toothpaste company. They have removed the cardboard boxes. So why can't Colgate learn from Solein? Why can't L'Oreal learn from Locaine? And Nestle Egypt has done a very innovative thing in their bottles. They have removed the plastic tear-offs that we see. If you pick up a PET bottle, there is a plastic tear-off apart from the cap. They removed the plastic tear-off. They kind of innovated the packaging with a click. And if it clicks, it means it is packaged correctly. It is safe. So why can't the other companies learn from Nestle Egypt to move towards reduction? And they have reduced 240 tons of tear-offs in just first 18 months. So another gap is knowledge sharing. Knowledge is existing. Business models are existing. Innovations are existing in forms in very, very nutshells of, startups as well as big conglomerates. But they need to talk to each other. We maybe need a bigger platform where they can exchange ideas. The third gap that I see is an upscaling gap. That solutions are existing, but how do we provide the startups a market connect? Either through incentives, as you said, funding, customer sensitization, where customer demands, where the youngsters and the Y2Ks of the world demands that we basically need green packaged material. We are not going to use plastics. So how do we customize the new customer, the new age customer, and how will policy enable the mass production and implementation of these solutions? So economies of scale, we always know economies of scale have brought down the cost for plastics over the past 30, 40 years. We need to look at economies of scale for alternatives. We need to economies of scale for innovation. And how do we kind of fund innovation, subsidize innovation, and sensitize the customer so that they demand. If they demand, companies will market it, companies will innovate it because they are doing it. There are many brands in the world who have 192 stores in the world for 44 years, and none of their product is packaged. There are brands existing in the world. So there are solutions existing. It's just that we need to make them talk to each other, create platforms, but at the same point, we need to upscale. We really need to share knowledge, create knowledge, and upscale all these solutions which are there. So I would say that's the constellation of challenges that we are living in. Maybe we have some way forward. So I'll stop there.
Thanks, Vaibhav. Quick follow-up. When you say about consumer behavior change, do you think our consumers, and I've spoken to some businesses who said, great, I can do all the design changes I want, but it costs money. At the end of the day, is the consumer willing to pay for it? What would be your thoughts on that?
See, at the end of the day, the design change in packaging, we are not asking to add new material. The design change in terms of the circularity is about reduction in their material. If they reduce the material, they save cost. They don't need to charge their customer for it. They actually will earn and save more money. So that's the message. And see, again, it is again a very mentality thinking. As you said, the mentality has to change. That what we are saying, design change is not add material, but reduce. Amazon has done it. Amazon has done a repackaging of their packaging design, where they have reduced and rearranged their stuff of their product that they are actually selling it off in a way that they need less cardboard now. They're saving cost. So we are not asking to charge the customer. We are saying that reduce your material. It is basically beneficial for the company, for the environment, and for the customer.
Excellent. Thanks, Vaibhav, for that. Let me move on to Sunidha on that theme. Actually, because Vaibhav did mention about collective knowledge sharing. I mean, and I think Sunidha is here from Malaysia. Just get in a bit of the Southeast Asia perspective, because Southeast Asia has been doing quite a bit, especially businesses on this theme. So Sunidha, if I may ask, and there's some really interesting work that you're doing with the CEO Action Network, where a group of CEOs that you're working with, and you also mentioned a bit when we had a conversation about the drivers, etc. So could you shed more light on it, and also if we could try and make this more about how these can act as knowledge sharing platforms of sorts in the long run?
Absolutely, Sandeep. Thanks very much to the organizers for having me here. So I'm involved in two such collectives. One is Climate Governance Malaysia, which is a country chapter of a World Economic Forum initiative for boards of directors to advocate for increased climate resilience by managing climate risks and seizing opportunities that would arise in this massive transition which the world has committed to. Then the other network that I'm involved in is a CEO Action Network. So one is directors and the other one is CEOs. And currently we have 48 members. And when you become part of this collective, there are certain commitments that you need to make about sustainability in the structure of ES and G. Then you also need to share your own best practices in capacity building, and you need to be involved in advocacy with the government, because it's critically important that the government sends the right signals for industry to undertake this transformation. So what we've been finding is that both organizations are staffed by volunteers, and they've gained tremendous momentum in the last 12 to 18 months, which mirrors what's happening in the business community around the world as well. So the increased demand for better reporting and disclosure, and I think the conversation is also moving beyond climate resilience and net zero targets. And I think now many businesses are starting to look at circularity or operating within planetary boundaries as their competitive advantage. So of course, there's this tension between market determined value and social values, Amazon, the company, and Amazon, the rainforest. And is the price of everything becoming the value of everything? And if something doesn't have a price, that means it's not valued. So this is the conversation that's coming up right now. And I think many companies are starting to take a hard look at the procurement process. Is it just value for money, or do you need a wider definition of value? And so this brings us back to this exclusive choice that we seem to be having. Are we going to protect the environment, or are we going to grow our business and our economy? But when you're having an inseparable bond, because nature enables our productive capacity, isn't it? Everything we do is extractive from nature. And our Earth Overshoot Day globally is end of July, whereas in Malaysia, it's actually end of May. So these are the sort of thinking that these thought leaders are demonstrating when they share their best practices within the network. And I'll give examples later. But essentially, how are we able to do both? How do we help consumers make the right choices, not just because it's cheaper, but it is simply better for the environment as well?
Sure. No, and just a quick follow-up. And this I'm talking from because a lot of us operate in India, and knowledge sharing is a problem here. People are a little bit cagey about knowledge sharing. I mean, is that the same scenario over there, or people are just being more open these days?
Okay, so yesterday, for example, we had a roundtable session in the telecommunications industry yesterday evening around this time actually, and we had 6 CEOs sitting on the panel, and they were all talking together about 3 broad themes: how they were going to reduce their own operational emissions, how they were going to work together to get consumers to make better choices, and number 3, what policies do they need to see from the government that makes us more resilient during a crisis, for example, an extreme or a sudden flooding event. So yes, they are competitors, but they are forced to work so closely together, partly because of the regulator, because they have a common enemy, as it were. But this is just my interpretation.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Yeah. But that brings them together. So I think it's premature to assume that competitors can't work together.
No, sure. It's more than an assumption. We've been trying for a while, because this entire thing of shared value has been around for a while in the whole discourse around here, but we haven't really managed. We just touched the tip of the iceberg here. So that's where I think sessions like this and more are needed to just, say that, look, it's a shared existence that we all have. As much as we can compete amongst each other, the market has to remain for us to sell our goods, right? So that's an understanding which will probably happen, but that's something that we're still looking forward to. So great, thanks, Sunitha. Over to you, Prabjot. Look, at the end of the day, Amazon might be doing some design thinking, but I just had a package in the morning. It came in 3 folds of packing with bubble wraps as well. Now, the thing is, as a consumer, when I see that, it is really disturbing, frustrating as well. I took almost 20 minutes to cut through that packaging to get to one hard drive, right? So now the thing is, look, businesses will do something. And as Sunitha mentioned, somewhere you need the common enemy, which is the regulator. And that's where I think I would want your views on this, Prabjot. And here I want to really, okay, let's try and spice it up. Misplaced policy level decisions. That happens a lot. And I've seen that, there are policy levels which are misinformed at times for whatever reason. I mean, I'm not doubting the intent of the policy, but sometimes these policies lead to actually more problems than it started out with. Can you shed some light on, because you've been working with the Planning Commission and you were working with the UNDP earlier on a lot of policy issues. So can you just, because the other day you had mentioned something really important about plastic micron size and how that could potentially be, the policy is not necessarily the right policy. So can you shed some light on that, Prabjot, if I may?
Well, thank you, Sandeep, and thanks to the organizers. Sorry for this little noise that I created. Suddenly there is a switch that I had to switch it on. And thank you very much. Well, I think so, hearing all the speakers there, it really ends me to say that what I've been reading, the next 50 years, the emphasis is going to be on environment, certainly. It has to be, if I may say so bluntly. So I think so what you said, your question is very interesting. It's really spicy. The misplaced policy. Yes, certainly. That's why the policymakers definitely take a lot of time in order to retest it. And in today's dynamic world that we are living in, and we're wonderful to listening, Sunitha. I think so. If I have to give you an example, how the policies, you see, colleagues in the front, both George and Navdeep did mention. Look at it that plastic is a policy which has energized people since the last 3-4, and I've been myself involved in UNDP, drafting up a program. In 2016, I knew that the EPR was coming in, and then how the EPR is placed, and luckily I was also in the committee there drafting these guidelines. We have since then talking that, look, the micron, I was taken by surprise to myself. I said that people are talking 50 microns. So I'm talking on a policy for you. 50 microns and less should be there. I said, no, sir, since I was interacting with the top officials, I will not name them. I said, sir, it should be 150 microns. They said, Sodi, you are going to make my life miserable. Why the hell are you saying 150 microns? We are from 50, we cannot jump to 150 microns. I said, sir, 50 microns is what is the weight of the bag. I said, if in an open team, I'm asked my team members, can anyone tell me what is the weight of a 1 kilogram bag of 50 microns? So that is the informed decision-making today we have. So to come back, it is about 6 to 7 grams. And we have both less than 50 microns or near around 50 micron bags, which are from the virgin plastics, and we have also from the recycled plastic. The carrying capacity as an Indian consumer or a developing world, we are trying to maximize our resources. For 1 kg, we will pack 2 kg and the bag will tear off suddenly because we want to maximize our resource use without realizing what we are doing. And in that, we tear off the resource which is meant to take care of it. So then I was talking to them. I said, sir, if it is 150 microns, the weight of the bag will be roughly about 20 to 22 grams or 25 grams. When 25 gram bags are there, the government, the consumer is going to keep that bag. And mind you, in every household, touch your heart and feel and then say what you are going to say. And we will reuse that bag. By reusing, we will have a circularity built in it. And I'm talking 2016, circularity was not in that fashion that it's today, if I may use this word. So sorry about that. But I said, sir, it will be a product life extension. And people will use that bag 4 times, 5 times, and it will not break off. When your carrying capacity is of 1 kilo, you will try and put 2 kilos in it. It will maximize the use. That's another circularity principle which you are talking. Then we came up to it. The government has finally ended up in, after a huge number of discussion. My discussion is way back in 2018. And we were then trying to say to the officials. And then now it comes to about 120 microns, that too from 1st January 23, practically still. And that's what the beauty of a misplaced or misinformed policy is. Had it been immediately done, I would say Indian government is really taking some fantastic decisions based on the ideas which people like yourselves are flaring it up. So that is one issue. So it is that bag, when it is going to come, it's not going to tear off easily. It's going to have a better carrying capacity and the pickup. The other advantage is, I was telling the policymakers is, sir, the pickup will be faster. The people who are engaged in the supply chain, which are the safai sathis or the waste pickers, I hate this word rack picker, with due apologies. I just don't like this word rack picker. And time and again, it is being used by every level. So they will pick it up faster because they will get value out of it, and they have to pick less, so get a better maximum price. When it is made of high density or low density polyethylene, this 120 microns, will get a better price to it. Not only that, Sandeep, the littering plastic, we think that the plastic is getting into the ocean, it's moving into the sea. How it is getting to, one needs to understand. It's this littering which is causing this. This flies, the thinner the plastic, the easier it breaks down, and it is not collected. And that litter gets into the water bodies, whether it's a drain, and the drain leads to another small river, and then a river leads to another big river, and then the big river leads to another. And it's by that time it has reached, it's all into a microplastic. And this is one of the biggest impact which a policy has made. And we may not look at from so many angles, but I was trying to look at so many angles into this. The other thing which I want to say before I pass the mic on to you, I don't want to take too much of the time, is something which is bothering me and which has not still come into the picture. Why, as a consumer, and I ask to all the panel members sitting here, what as a consumer excites me to use a recycled product? Why I should use recycled product? I have plenty available, and how do I come to know that there is recycled product available in the market? So the labeling, and this is another thing which I've been talking to the government very strongly, is the labeling aspect. I have this beautiful bottle. It has all the labels on it, the product, the expiry, manufacturing, and every little detail on it. But it just doesn't have something which excites me. Of what is it made of? How much of the recycling material? Can you beat it if I buy a Nokia phone or an iPhone and it says 10% of the material gone into making this iPhone is having recycled material? What for are we talking? We are talking all about resource optimization. We are talking all about resource use. My dear friends, 200 billion metric tons of all around resources are being used worldwide every year. 9 billion we are using in the country. What is the recycling rate available for them? Find it out, you will be amazed. I think I'll stop here. I have more examples to go by, but let's leave it here. Labeling is one thing which will come down. Recycled material gone into a product. Over to you, Sandeep. Thanks for the opportunity.
No, thanks, Prabhjot. That was quite thought-provoking as well. I mean, though I would like to take the discussion just beyond plastic, but this is really important because, in a country of 1.3 billion people, this is really relevant. It might seem like a small issue, these plastic bags, but if you inflate it to amount of plastic that we use in our daily lives, this is significant. So kudos to you, Prabhjot, for bringing that up. Just a quick follow-up with you, Prabhjot. On the policy level sphere, resource optimization, where does that figure in comparison to recycling? I mean, in terms of are we actually doing enough at the source level rather than at the consumer level? So if you could just take a half a minute on that, Prajot.
So I think so. If it comes to any material, we were cutting across today morning. I was having a long chat with the Niti Aayog director, senior advisor, and we were talking on the EPR policies across to the industry in other sectors. We came to a common point that collection and segregation is the real thing which has to begin in every supply chain. And we have to hit at that if we have to really get into a material efficiency and material reuse, whether it's tires, whether it's batteries, whether it's solar panels, how the government of India has established 11 committees, and luckily some opportunity I got. I'm all over these 11 committees, and I've got a real opportunity to learn. And I think so it's very important for us to see the supply chain across that, and what are those gaps, what are those limitations, and what are those challenges which are impeding the whole show. I'll close here.
No, thanks, Prabjot. Thank you so much. Great. Over to you, Sudhir. Sudhir, you bring a different kind of perspective. CSR has been playing a massive part in or at least is thought to be playing a massive part in this issue, right? Especially back in 2013, when the CSR Act came, we thought that maybe on the environment part, we will finally have some action from corporates, not just from the regulatory perspective of compliance, but to actually have social spending as well. So in your organization, if I may, and that's, to bring some organizational perspective onto it, what has your organization been, thinking about this, or what are your thoughts about it, and are actions being done, et cetera, et cetera. So over to you, Sudhir.
Yeah, can you hear me okay, Sandeep?
Yes, can hear you, fine.
Yeah, so it's lovely being here, and thank you for the opportunity. So I think CSR Act, while it sort of symbolizes from a corporate's perspective, a little bit of a compliance and sort of a punitive thing, but I think what it's done at the ground over a period of time is bring corporates into the social and social into the corporates, right? So I think the first sort of corporates that are sort of undertook projects probably struggled their way in terms of, hey, how hard can helping community be, or how hard can education make a difference? But I think there's a lot of learning, a lot of models, a lot of pathways, for a lot of better word, that sort of came about it, and we need a similar sort of a pattern in the circular economy as well, right? So I think if I think we're talking about priorities, we're talking about ESG coming into play and things like that. So when it becomes a priority in the boardrooms and discussions of that nature, then I think a similar sort of CSR Companies Act in the context of circular economy would for sure sort of drive a similar behavior and things for sure. I mean, if it's a priority for me as a shareholder and for my clients and so on, I will make it a priority to sort of invest and drive that sort of a thing, right? And sort of case in point, when we were looking for high impact carbon projects in the context of Bangalore. And one of the things we did fairly well is in the sort of wastage of food, right? I mean, we have these cafeterias on our floors, and we sort of have these boards that say, hey, this is the amount of food that's wasted today. We put a board and we want to sort of have, and I think Viber talked about mindset. And, in that context, we wanted to change people's mindset about reducing food waste, right? So that was the first part of it. But then taking it a step further, we then said, well, all over the leftover food, why don't we just sort of connect with Robin Hood Army and then sort of give that food over, right? And we didn't want to stop there also. So we also work with a lot of our government schools in sort of STEM related projects, and we said, hey, we have this challenge in sort of connecting, sort of the suppliers and sort of the food thing. Can you think about some sort of a STEM project to sort of enable that, right? And I think the kids were really excited and came up with something that's similar to like an Uber sort of a concept, and sort of did that, right? We were still not sure if we did the full circle in terms of the food wastage itself, right? And luckily we were able to sort of find out with Sahas and Carbon Masters in eventually converting the remaining food that was a significant amount of food that was wasted, not just in CGI, but across a lot of the tech companies and so on, to where it was just being dumped, right? And this project that we sort of undertook with with Sahas was phenomenal because it sort of converted that food wastage, the last sort of things, into biogas, right? And what's unique about this is many of the biogas setups that are typically there then take the biogas and convert that into electricity. But we didn't do that. This was unique in the sense that we took that biogas and directly pumped into the kitchens of the households, right? So over 1 year, almost 500 tons of waste has been converted into about 10 kilos, roughly equivalent of LPG that's actually being pumped in the homes, right? So this sort of takes all the way from, sort of what Viber started off with, mindset and a little bit of technology and sort of not being happy with the sort of the last mile sort of a thing. So we then took that further with the help of Sahas and Carbon Masters into converting that into a biogas product and looking at more efficient way of delivering it directly into the households as an equivalent of LPG, and in turn there. And this is a great model, and we sort of went through this completely blind, right? We sort of went sort of figuring out where and how. Now, what if, as Viber said, there were more of these, more examples of these, more case studies of this, then as a corporate, I don't need to be hunting for these things, right? And that's what's really changing in the CSR Companies Acts in terms of the other areas of education or women empowerment and things. There are examples, there is predecessors, there are case studies that we as corporates can say, hey, I don't need to be scrambling in the dark for these. Can I go find them and actually implement them, right? And as you heard from George, it's important to us. When we are really committed to driving carbon zero by 2030 or even sooner than possible, right? But we were scrambling for what to do, and it's sort of almost blind leading the blind, right? So I think there needs to be a lot more of demystifying circular economy. It's still very profound in my example. It's still very overwhelming for us as it's very research oriented, but it needs to be simple. It needs to be practical. It needs to be led by examples like this biogas, which now we're trying to really push it out into the media and so on, so that it's replicatable by other corporates.
Thanks, Sudhir. This demystification is something we'll hopefully try and address over this panel, because circular economy is a big term used in B schools a lot, used in conferences a lot. A lot of people come back and say, what does it even mean? So I think, and it's a fairly simple concept, actually, if you really look at it, right? So, Sudhir, a quick follow-up. I mean, and I'll probably come back to the demystification and the individual responsibilities, just on the employees, because you guys are a massive employer, right? Of people, right? So, where do you think they fit into this whole concept of circularity for you, if I may? I've actually jumped a question for you, but it's just trying to see if I could fit it into the theme. Yeah.
No, absolutely. Love to take that. So I think the way we look at our members or employees members as we call them, as agents of change. I mean, like, it could be in the context of education, it could be in the context of environment and so on, because environment is not, or things that we talked about from plastics or things are not something that only few of us, everyone deals with it. And it's more important that we leave a better environment for our future generations as well, right? So it's a very personal thing. People in their societies talk about it, people in their schools, kids talk about it, and so on. So we see as, firstly, how do we sort of enable and prepare our members as agents of change? So we did a lot of, a couple of things I can talk about. This probably sounds sort of silly, but I think they're pretty fundamental in the context of, because you don't go from zero to high ninja circular economy and not tomorrow. You start with a lot of awareness, and then you kind of have the sort of the employees, the members become the agents of change, who then sort of propagate that sort of the advocacy part of it, and then comes the sustainability part, right? So we're in that second stage in terms of teaching our employees in terms of, well, hey, there are different ways of doing things. So for example, when Earth Day happened, we had a program about sustainability at home, where about 600 of our members were involved in like doing yourself kits in terms of from personal care products or mosquito repellents, which can be natural based repellents instead of buying the good night sort of products and so on. So fundamental things to say that there is an alternative to chemicals, right? I mean, you sort of expose them, and sort of one thing I didn't realize, something I wanted to bring out, which ties into with what Mr. Talked about in the earlier thing about microplastics, right? 2 years ago, we stopped using plastic toothbrushes, right? I mean, this something I accidentally bumped into an article which talked about bamboo toothbrushes, and I'm like, why would somebody use bamboo toothbrushes, right? And I sort of researched about toothbrushes as just a quick thing 2 years ago. I was like 30 billion toothbrushes go into landfill every year, right? And they are completely non-recyclable, zero recyclable, and they take 400 years to, if they can, they will to decompose, right? And the worst part is they sort of, sort of come and become the microplastics that we were just talking about. And when I just initially read about the article, I'm like, yeah, 400 years, to 30 billion, who cares? But when I saw the article delve into it to talk a little bit about how this microplastics get consumed and we ingest it. And this is happening across the world. And I didn't realize it till about 2 years ago. Then this is just by a study by WWF. We ingest a credit card worth of microplastics every week. Every week. We ingest one credit card's worth of plastic every week. And that hit me home. So when you make a message, very preachy in the context of earth conservation and all that stuff, it's great. I feel good at the moment and so on. When you make the message personal, because it is personal, it is about our environment, it is about our health, it is about our future generation, and you make that message personal, the fact that microplastics, you are consuming a credit card worth of it every week. All of you are. So my personal appeal to you is stop using plastic toothbrushes today. Please go to Amazon as we're talking about it and look for bamboo toothbrushes and so on, right? So broadly, awareness in the context of a personalized message is very important, Sandeep. It's not about the general broad preaching of do this, do that. It's great for the environment. How do you personalize that is very, very critical. And that's the phase we're moving into from a campaign perspective, right? And then lastly, I think we did talk about technology, right? And technology is a pretty big enabler in this context in terms of supply demand that George talked about. Also just data. I mean, just this is very important to know, where is this coming from, where is it going? You kind of have that traceability of information across all these particles and so on, right? And technology comes in a big place. So we are also encouraging our members in terms of how to use technology for environment traceability, supply demand, and just sort of can we just put this in a visualization of how does it even look in terms of, right? So these are some of the initiatives. I would just want to sort of stop here, Sandeep.
Thanks, Sudhir. That's a great thing. I didn't know I was ingesting one credit card every week. I think that hits home, really. I'll come to you. Thanks. I mean, and you actually, there's this interesting analogy you made: blind leading the blind. And I think that's where the collective action part really sinks in. And I'm a big believer in that myself. So, so I would actually go to Sunitha first, and I'll ask you in terms of, you mentioned that you would be, there are cases and case studies out there. There are success stories out there, Sunitha. In terms of, firstly, what is your impression about this whole recycling versus reduce, reuse? And what do you think businesses think about it? And if there are some, because we also want to make the session about solutions, not just the challenges, right? So Sunitha, what would you be, if you could shed some light on that before I move on to Viva.
So there are a few case studies of businesses that I'd like to share, and most of them are Malaysian, but the first one I'm going to share is actually Swedish. It's a sportswear company and it's called Houdini. And most probably this is the first company in the world in 2018 where they disclosed their business model in accordance to planetary boundaries, where they're using nature itself as the blueprint. So they fight overconsumption. They collaborate closely with their suppliers, and they ensure that everything is working within the planetary boundary. And this is a really unique way of designing the case study. And so a lot of products that they could have designed and created, they actually voluntarily chose not to, because they said this is going to be consuming more from the environment than the environment can replenish. I'd also like to share 3 examples of local Malaysian businesses that, the examples have been shared internally quite a lot in Malaysia. So one is Fat Hopes, where used cooking oil is being exported to the European Union for use as biofuels. And because there's so much demand from the European Union right now, the price of used cooking oil is actually higher than crude palm oil. And so what's happening is that the market is correcting on its own, and the exporters are using crude palm oil to dilute used cooking oil because you get a higher price for used cooking oil. So this is one of the unintended consequences that can happen. And you collect this used cooking oil from bazaars, from Ramadan bazaars, for example, from the McDonald's chain. So they hand over the cooking oil to the recycler, and then it's exported to the European Union. Green carpenter. There's a carpenter who's built up a business over the last few years, creating furniture entirely out of recycled wood. And I noticed earlier this was actually brought up in the conversation. And there's a lot of demand for it, but it depends on the design. The design is actually extremely elegant. And so it's catering to a sort of upper middle class type of aesthetic sense. Green Steps. It started off as a community project where this individual collected coffee grounds from all of the cafes in the neighborhood. And then he used community centers to compost this. So who got involved? The local mosque, the police station, the school, and eventually he had so much coffee grounds that he actually had to rent a piece of land. So, and then you grow vegetables from it, and then you sell the vegetables back to the local cafe. Another example I'd like to share is that our local recycling industry actually has tremendous capacity for recycling solid waste. But unfortunately, for various reasons, local solid waste is not being sorted at source. And this means it's almost impossible to recycle. And for various reasons, including perverse incentives with the concessionaires. And this is really critical because if concessionaires are being paid per ton of solid waste collected, then there really isn't any incentive for them to support separation of waste. But because the local recycling industry has so much capacity, we can actually import solid waste that has already been sorted, and this is being recycled domestically. I still remember 3 ambassadors ago, or ambassador from the European Union, he was giving a talk, and from his jacket pocket, he takes out a bar of gold. And he says, I visited this recycler outside of Brussels, and they gave me this, it's a startup company. And he said, you're a startup company and you're giving away bars of gold. And they said, we extracted this from X thousand mobile phones. So there's a huge industry, there are huge opportunities. And this is the potential, right, for businesses to be able to pivot. And in Malaysia, advocacy is already taking place with the FMCGs. These are brands who are worried about their packaging ending up in places that it shouldn't, for example, in rivers, and then being picked up by residents, and then it becomes a social media issue, for example. So 11 brands, including one that I'm associated with, has set up a Malaysian recycling initiative. All manufacturers are in intensive conversations with the relevant ministries like the Economic Planning Unit to discuss extended producer responsibilities, and this is happening with foreign government support. The Ministry of Environment has had prolonged discussions with plastic manufacturers because they want to phase out zero single-use plastic. So there's going to be no more single-use plastic within a certain time frame. And this type of advocacy, all of government, whole of society, has led to a series of roundtable discussions that we recently organized. Across 5 months, we had 14 sessions across four industry sectors run entirely by volunteers, sharing ideas as to the sort of policy recommendations that can get us across the finish line.
Sure.
So these are some examples I wanted to share.
Thank you, Sunidha. Love those examples. Actually, before Vaibhav, hold on a sec. I need to get in Wilma in here because with these examples, we need to also understand. Wilma, from your perspective, SARS has been doing a lot of work around this, and I would like to now get this discussion back to the theme. The theme is, how are we moving beyond recycling? So your first thoughts on that, and what are the sectors that you think we need to look at first from the perspective of replicability as well as scalability? Because I think doing pilots is great, but if it's not really scalable, then there's no point doing it really. So over to you, Wilma.
Yeah, thank you, Sandeep. And I speak today as the CEO of the business side of Sahas, which is Sahas Zero Waste. But I also remember way back 20 years ago when Sahas, the NGO, was started. In 2001, we had this first campaign to reduce plastic. The campaign was Less Plastic for Me. And we looked at, all that we're talking about, the problems today, we tried to implement, because already in 2000, you had the first set of municipal solid waste rules that were coming in. And so even as NGO Sahas was focused on implementation, we took up this first campaign to reduce use of single-use plastic. And it is therefore with great satisfaction, that we see this journey of 20 years, we see the problem having escalated, and now we have a situation where, legislation, as Mr. Sodhi said earlier, enables this quick action to take place. And therefore, when you look at consumers now being more conscious about carrying their own shopping bag rather than coming back with 10 different plastic bags. But unfortunately, in this situation, we've seen other things happening which are really not aligned with SDG 12 responsible consumption. We see plastic being replaced by single-use paper. The plastic cup is now the paper cup. The plastic bag is every vegetable comes in this brown paper bag. And even more disturbing is the fact that you have now bioplastics being talked of as alternatives. And again, we know, the situation in terms of the difficulties in collecting, in recycling, and in the footprint that we will have in using and consuming. So really, it is something that collaboratively we've got to agree on. Single use, whether it's paper, plastic, bioplastics, has this huge footprint. And so therefore we need regulations from the government to actually address this. As also we need industry who is talking about responsible business, being responsible in giving us these products which we know really are not very responsible. Yeah, so I would like to place that as a starting point, but I would also quickly go to emerging new areas which are showing great promise. Look at sustainable menstrual products in India. Yeah, we have a large market. And first of all, it's so great to be talking on this forum, men all around, and we have absolutely no problem about talking about menstruation, because that's a biological process, and women today are accepting the fact that, this is something that we need to address as a huge problem if we continue the single use of sanitary napkins, etc., when you have alternatives. So in this huge market, where we have over 300 women in India in that particular age of menstruation, a market which is 33 billion rupees large, and we have products like the cloth pads, the reusable cloth pads. We have menstrual cups that are trying to make this dent into this market, and we've got good consumer acceptance of this product. We have professional doctors who have also endorsed this product as a best in terms of health and hygiene. And yet we see great resistance from other sources, including now we would expect the government, who is pushing for better availability of women hygiene products in rural India, to give this push for this product. Yeah, whether it is GST, elimination, whether it is incentivizing startups, and that's where your jobs are going to come in, because you'll have women making this in smaller SHG groups. If you look at the quality of the product today that's available for cloth napkins, it's amazing. You see all young women today proudly endorsing it. So we would like to see this market penetration. It's currently between 3 to 5% only. I don't see why it cannot be 50% in the next 5 years. Yeah, so we would want industry now, and I would, ask CGI next and Diageo and all the other corporates here to put that as part of your CSR also. Yeah. So this is one other emerging sector which I think has great potential. And quickly also on textiles. So circular textiles is something that, the whole waste stream of fashion and fast fashion has created so much of problems across the world. So we as an organization, and Sahas Private Limited, has a whole vertical around circular textiles where we are looking for upcycling post-consumer fabric, but also creating swap shops. Yeah. For instance, I have not had to buy anything new for the last 1.5 years. I go into one of our swap shops, which is just in the office around the corner, and all of us, kind of make available each other's kind of apparel. It's the best way in which we can reduce. So there are so many examples, and I hope I have a little bit more time, but let me hand over back to you. Because,
no, I would love listening to you, Wilma. That was great. I mean, look, I can tell you from our organization, we take sustainable menstruation really seriously. We support quite a bit on that. So, I mean, and this is, I think for the high population that we have, this is absolutely important. It's not just a health hazard, it's an environment hazard as well. Vaibhav, over to you. Wilma, I'll just come back to you quickly, right after I have some inputs from Vaibhav on this. Basically, you touched upon the challenges and some of these case studies. What next? I mean, what is really needed to be done? Great, knowledge sharing, we put across a collective platform, et cetera, et cetera. What is the big disruptor going to be here? I mean, what will bring us scale? What will bring us, if you're talking about a bamboo toothbrush, it might still be packed in plastic and got delivered to me for all I know, right? I mean, that's something that I'm actually worried about. When Sudhir said this credit card toothbrush, this is the first thing that came to mind. Go to Amazon, order, but it comes again in a little, cardboard box. So what are we doing about these kind of, design thinking at all streams, upstream, downstream, use, et cetera, et cetera. So,
see, you have to look at it from two different lenses, which basically don't, are sometimes, against each other or maybe don't understand each other. One is the government lens. One is who makes policy, and another is the private sector lens, right? Government of India has made some policies which are disruptor in a sense where they are talking about particular plastics, particular items in the market to be eliminated, which have no use, they serve no purpose, they don't value add. That is one type of disruptor. The companies who are basically either manufacturing or are packaging are more inclined towards recycling than, at least I'm just talking about India. I am very, very specific now talking about India. More than 95% of the effort on CSR as well as EPR, if you even look at the case studies, are focused on collection, transportation, recycling. Because the argument is, if you improve collection and transportation better, you will be able to recycle better. And that's where we are putting, because that's how we see where our money, we are putting our money where our mouth is. But first of all, I'll congratulate you, because this type of discussions will lead to some kind of disruption. Nobody is talking about reuse and reduce, which warrants design change. You see Indian policy, you pick up any waste management rules, you just look at the weightage that has been put up on the collection, transportation, and recycling bit, and the weightage that has been put up on reuse, reduce part of it. What are the disruptors that Indian policy has put in place for design change? There is no, GIZ developed this resource efficiency policy for Niti Aayog long back. It is still in draft stage, but the whole idea, the vision and the background and the base of that policy was reuse and reduce. Because we need to save resources at the point of the day. And it is in line of the costing as well. People will save money, and the waste that is going out will get reduced. That's the whole idea. That's the core of circular economy. What we are doing right now is basically managing what we are generating. And we are spending a lot more money and a less more mind there, which we should more mind and less money in terms of innovation, in terms of design change. So if something has to happen, I think the disruption has already started across the world. I would say the next thing that should happen is the knowledge is available. really it is available. I've shared some reports in the chat today, and these are really landmark reports. Ellen MacArthur Foundation has done an amazing job in documenting almost I think 120 companies from various stratas of, they are like medical, they are like many sectors who have done amazing job on upstream innovation. And it is a report about the solutions. It doesn't talk about any policy. It doesn't talk about, a general gyan. It is about documenting the case studies that companies have discussed in their board meetings, put it out in the market, and some have replicated. So as Sudhir also said, there is not enough, companies look out for knowledge. Knowledge is out there. Companies can learn from each other. So what you said, generating that connect is one start towards a disruption, because if companies see economic sense, and which the companies have, if they see economic sense and they look long term in terms of the packaging solutions, in terms of the reduction solutions, they will always go towards it. Right now in India, companies are struggling with the government in implementing EPR. There is no clarity right now with the companies if they go to the state, whom to pay, what to do, what contract to sign. And all that energy is just focused on what we are not discussing today and what we should not focus on, which is collection, transportation, and recycling. So I think disruption has started across the world. We need to tap into it. We need to learn from it and contextualize it for Indian context, Indian geography.
Yeah, no, I agree. I completely agree. I think knowledge is you can see it all around you, basically. Prabjot, if I may get you in, I mean, whoever did this, look, we can make all the policies in the world. Carrot, stick, I don't know what works. I mean, maybe a combination of it works. But what will be disruptive here? Because, look, I mean, and I'm again on the theme, what do we do to move beyond just recycling? I mean, at the end of the day.
Are you asking me, please?
Yes, Prabjot, over to you. A quick 2 minutes. Oh, actually, we're running short of time. So 2 minutes to you, Prabjot. Go for it.
Right. Can you see me?
Yes.
So, there was, I'll club your thing with another question which was in the chat box, which was very interesting. And the question goes, what are the traditional methods in India in circularity? I was talking to you the other day that I think so some wise men talked about 40 years to us, or 50 years, maybe, if you say so, that newspaper has to be collected. A simple phenomena, fundamentally, every CEO sitting there has a hand on his heart and will say, yes, I do separate newspapers and I sell it off. Every middle class family, you and me all come from that region, and Vilma would agree with that. We bargain with that poor person. Oh, no, I'm not going to give you at 9 rupees, but 10 rupees. And anyway, the paper is collected. Now, why I'm trying to give you this example is that the newspaper print, I was talking with the newsprint industry in the material recycling, one of the sessions. The newspaper collection in India is 94%. And white paper, no wise man could ever think and tell to anybody in the household that please don't throw the white paper in the dustbin and don't simply tear it. We use this paper, I simply tear it and throw it in the bin. And the minute it gets wet, it increases your waste. Today, white paper is twice as costly than the newspaper. And the collection of white paper is only 4%. Oh. We shred it, we throw it, and we put it into the bin. I just cannot understand these fundamentals, that how can we get into it? So Webber talked about all these issues, which are very right. So, and I'm not going to debate with him, but there'll be other options when we will debate, and we are good friends to each other as well. So I do not disagree to the fact that there has to be an infectious approach to design. And the government of India is not sitting, I mean, I'm not speaking for government, is not correct that they are not thinking around it. They are very much, had it been not for this reason, the government of India would not have started these 11 committees. And mind you, these 11 committees is not an outcome of 20 days of discussions within the government of India. It goes way back to 4 years. And we were starting to talk since last 4 years. And there is when we were starting talking of recycling industry should be there. I even voiced it. Why doesn't India, 4 years back, I said it to the then person, I will not name him. And I said, why can't we have a recycling in ministry? If we are consuming so much of material and we are not having the material coming back to us, the point Weber is making, and if we cannot bring it back to the system, then might as well really have an industrial ministry around it. We can't go in and say DPCCP is there, the industrial department is there. You have to have a strong support. So coming back to your question once again, which gives me a very strong reason, is that how much of us are ready to buy recycled material? We see it as a second-hand material. Please believe me, we see it as a second-hand material. A recycled material for us is a low-quality product because the quality of recycling in the country is low.
But my question,
that's what needs to be strengthened.
Yeah, my question, Prabjot, and actually, I'm sorry, I'm running out of time, is to how do we get into more reduce? So basically, a quick one-liner, Prabjot, what do we need?
So the question of reduce is to get the material back into the system.
Okay, great.
And that's what I was exemplifying, whether it was paper, whether it was newsprint, or whether it was recycling industry. Why the incentivization is not made to the recycling? Mind you, Sandeep, allow me for a minute and I won't speak later. The recycling industry is all cash-based industry. It's an absolutely not a transparent way of working and nobody is investing in it. If they are not getting to come into a systematized approach, which the policymakers with these state pollution and the central pollution boards are talking about, then why not make an effort to get into them and understand from their point of view, why are the people not registering?
True.
Over.
Correct. Thanks, Prabjot. Thank you. Wilma, one quick thing. You mentioned the two sectors. One was sustainable menstruation. You mentioned a few more. I mean, in terms of circularity, and I remember you and I having this conversation, food and electronics. I mean, electronics, I think Sudhir and George as well touched up on it. But on the food sector specifically, Wilma, a quick 1-minute interjection on the food sector and what could circularity mean there? Wilma, could be quite interesting for us to know.
Yeah, sure, because this is again another sector, the food aggregators today, a huge potential for a reuse system. You know, we had an example of the dabbawalas in Mumbai 20, 30 years ago, and they still exist, of course, diminished to a large extent. But what I'd like to see now is the food aggregators, instead of giving us our food, you know, in these containers, which are again single use, have, just like you have a kitchen for cooking the food, have a cleaning system also, where the consumer will give back the steel or the plastic reusable container. It goes back to a cleaning system and it does the round back to the consumer. The consumer will pay more, and he will, because this is convenience, and he will have to pay more. Perhaps the food aggregator will reduce the number of deliveries that he will do per day, but he will have a system which is circular, and we will have a system which we'll be proud of. And people like me who otherwise don't use a food aggregator perhaps would be the new customer base that he would go to. So I really believe that all of us have to push our big brands now into this kind of system, where again you will create jobs. You will have less delivery boys on the street, you will have less traffic on the street, but you will have a good cleaning system, more jobs created there, and also a good hygienic system, because people trust cooking happening externally in kitchens. We've now got to trust and make sure that cleaning systems equally are in place to give us a good clean container, which is, you know, reusable, washable, and coming back to us.
Yeah, sure. No, that makes sense. Actually, we're running out of time, but I think, I think we would not be able to take Q&A, which is quite a shame, but it's been such an enriching discussion. But anyway, I'll still try and see if we can fit in a few more comments here. One is to Sudhir. I know as an individual also you have some of those ideas about what as individuals, and you touched upon it, the credit card experience. Excellent. I mean, it really hit home in terms of the understanding. But what do you think? And if we could take it more at a level of an individual, and what do we do? Like I said, we get into this demystifying circular economy at a home level. What does this even mean to me, right? So
yeah.
And I'll
No,
talk to
thanks.
each of you for probably a thought on that, because this is quite interesting. This is what I want to end with, on the demystification of all of this.
Yeah, and I'll try to keep it brief, Sandeep. So I think while I think we had a lot of discussion from a manufacturing perspective, we sort of consume and then we want to recycle it back. But I think one of the important components of this at the end of the day is, besides the corporations, the NGO, the government, the policies, is us citizens at the end of the day, right? And I think if you just think about where we are today, we are sort of imaging and mirroring a little bit of the consumer's sort of behavior of the Western, right? And when I was growing up, I would use a pencil till it really ran out of lead. I mean, like my dad would whack me up if I threw a pencil that was more than halfway not used, right? And we would only get one pencil at a time. But now my kid has a box of pencils. It's barely half used and it's lying all around. Who's at fault? I mean, partly me, partly sort of the fact that we are now in the context of GDP growth and stuff, promoting a lot of consumer culture, right? So the utility time of a pencil, the utility time of a pen, the utility time of a phone is shrinking day by day by day, right? So you can design great products from a recycle perspective and so on, but the utility time is still shrinking. So we need fundamental sort of education back to the consumers, my kids per se, or the generation. Boss, you don't throw your pencils just like that, right? You don't throw your laptops just like that. Use it and figure out how to extend the time, right? And we as parents are at fault, and we need to sort of get off from that consumer mindset of buy and buy and buy and buy and buy to yes, GDP growth is important, but it's really important to reduce the wastage, right? And improve the utility time of those products, right? And in that context, I think we have, as parents, we as citizens, have a role model to play. And and it's sort of the free rider problem. It's not my air, it's not my water. Why should I bother? And I should sort of consume whatever I can, right? But unfortunately, you can fix fundamental great products at the manufacturing side. You can recycle as much as it, but what if you're just recycling them as fast as possible? We haven't solved the problem yet if we don't include the citizens in the equation, right? And that's where I think the demystification comes in, because if you want the consumers at the end of the day, because this is all about consumption at the end of the day, then you need to bring them the equation. You need to make it simple. But today it's very profound, very overwhelming for me to understand what a circular economy, as a citizen, as an individual, help me understand. I understand rainwater harvesting. I understand bamboo brushes, but don't throw words like this policies and stuff. I don't get it. So we got to figure out keeping the citizen at the center. We can debate here all the policies we want, but at the end of the day, look, it's a consumer that matters, right? And all we're doing is we'll only accelerate how quickly we waste products, even with recycler. But we need to stop and get out of this Western mindset of, the utility time of a product is shrinking, right? So that's my sort of last point, Sandeep.
Thank you, Sudhir. Okay, so last words to everybody on this point: demystification of CE. It's a massive word. People don't really get it sometimes. And a touch up on last word. We're really, really running out of time right now. So in fact, we have run over time, but I'm hoping that we can spend 5 minutes more. So starting with you, Wilma, demystification of circular economy, number one, and number two, if you have any final thoughts on this as well.
Yeah, the circular economy must be practiced on the ground. Otherwise, it's just going to be theory. And I think the fact is that we've got enough of examples in India to be able to implement it on the ground. So for me, that is what it would mean. Yeah, just having it being practiced and implemented on the ground.
Thank you, Wilma. Sunitha?
I just want to, from the business point of view, I just want to remind businesses that are listening in that they can operate because they have a social license to operate. And just as how we're having to price carbon, at some stage, the cost of this destruction to the environment the amount of resources that you're extracting from it, I believe the pendulum is going to swing and many businesses are going to lose their social license to operate. And so directors and management need to be aware of that.
Thanks, Sunita. Good thoughts. Vaibhav, there.
I would just say three things. Go on a plastic-free journey in your homes. It is a journey. It's not a one thing. Segregate, segregate, segregate. We have been saying it again and again. That's part 2. The third is, please make your friends and family also go on a plastic-free journey. Start from your home. If enough of the people do it, we are going to solve a lot of problems. As Sudhir said, citizens right at the center. These are my 3 closing remarks.
Thanks, Prabjot.
I just have to say what just Sudhir said, material use efficiency. It's nothing more than that. It's just transparent, traceable ways of material use efficiency. That for me is circular economy.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. I mean, and it's a shame we couldn't take any questions, but I've seen that some of the speakers were responding to the questions on the chat box. So thank you for doing that. You really made my life much easier because otherwise this would have been. So yeah, in my closing, I would just implore everybody, individual action, design thinking, great. We don't see enough businesses putting circular targets out there. We have net zero targets. We have a lot of other targets out there. What circularity as a strategy, it's always missing from annual reports, board reports, as well as sustainability reports, especially in India, whatever I have seen. I think that needs to come in because I think that will set the tone because competitiveness actually is quite high in India. One company does it, the other will do it, and so on and so forth. I think that's going to be one of the thematic areas that we will look at. Obviously, knowledge sharing. And thank you everyone for asking these great questions. I've seen some of them. It's a pity that we could not take them. We'll try and answer as much as we can. Also, after the event, you will get some resources that will be sent to you as a takeaway in terms of best case studies, as well as links to different kinds of resourcing that you can read on, so that this just does not remain just another discussion, but we can have follow-ups to this as well. So with that, I would pass it over back to the organizers. And thank you so much, everybody. It was quite an enriching discussion, I would say.
Thank you.
So over to you, Panchali.
Thank you so much. Thanking all the attendees and all the speakers who have joined today for the webinar. We can see a very interesting chat going on. All the attendees are very much, and they have enjoyed the discussion and they have got great comments for all the speakers. So thank you again, thanking everyone for joining today. Have a good evening ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye.